Hello and welcome to Roane State Community College's refresher class on the topic of culture of safety. Uh, this this lecture is based off the strategy for a national EMS culture of safety. Uh, it was updated several years ago and is now kind of a big push, particularly in the National Registry curriculum. So fasten your seatbelts, trays in an upright position, and we'll take off and do this thing. So the objectives for this lecture, and it's a fairly short lecture, is to define a culture of safety, identify and explain the six core elements necessary to advance an EMS culture of safety, and then identify the role of EMS providers in establishing a culture of safety within an EMS organization. Okay, so this is straight out of the strategy for National EMS Culture of Safety. You'll find it referenced at the end of this lecture. And basically, you can read faster than I can speak, so we'll take just a second and use your reading. So, what the previous slide was saying is, and it's usually true, is that in EMS, in emergency response, whether it's fire, EMS, rescue, whatever, we tend to lag behind the other professions within healthcare, right? Particularly the in-hospital setting kind of stuff. So, one of the uh, things that were identified is risk to EMS personnel. So, the risk to EMS personnel you all know very well. Inherently, we do work in unpredictable and dynamic environments. We have long hours, limited resources, not only for like emotional support, but also in terms of other ambulances on this available, other fire apparatus that are available, the availability of rescue technicians and equipment. And so that resources and assistance speaks to what we need as emergency responders, but also kind of what we get outside of our own realm. Okay, and additionally, exposures to emotional stress, fatigue, and violence, along with our increased risk of having motor vehicle collisions, particularly while on the job, and other on the job injuries, right? Back injuries, shoulder injuries, and so on. So, you know, we need to start thinking of ways in our own practice and then in the bigger picture, our agency's practices of reducing or decreasing the frequency of these events and increasing the idea of how we can do things better so that we don't experience these. Okay. For EMS personnel, right, we are 2.5 times likelier than the average worker to be killed on the job. Okay. And transportation related injury rate is 5 times higher than the national average. Okay. So, I come from a fire background. The number one killer for firefighters is cardiac events. But right up near the top, right, is death due to MVCs or motor vehicle collisions going to and from scenes. So these are things we need to take into account, right? We always say it's not our emergency, but yet we drive in excess of 10 miles over the posted speed limit in accordance with Tennessee state law. And we do things at times that put people at risk for something that we preach in a non-emergent situation. It's not that big a deal, right? It's not our emergency. So, so one of the things we can do, especially in relation to this slide, is drive a little bit slower, drive a little with more concern for your own safety, right? Drive 10 miles over the speed limit, because some folks are in competitive systems that say you have to be at a certain destination or a certain place at within a certain number of minutes. Um, Look, if the speed limit's 50, you can only go 60, and that's with due regard to the safety of others. And at some point, your agency needs to, sometimes that, and it's difficult. You're put in difficult situations, right? A lot of pressure from supervisors and so on. But at the end of the day, who becomes liable for those injuries should they occur in an accident? Um, Always drive and participate in activities with due regard to the safety of yourself and others. That's the take-home message. Risk of harm to patients. This one is that in and out of patient settings, hospital patient settings have put in place systems to decrease errors leading to patient injuries. Um, we're getting there, right? And the EMS side, right? We've got the mechanical cots. We have other, better stair chairs, so on and so forth. But what has your system done in terms to decrease errors leading to patient injury? Whether that's medication errors or that's lifting and moving or transferring errors. They put more ambulances or fire wagons on the road or available to decrease the load so that we can meet patients a little bit fresher with more resources and so on. The answer is probably no, but I don't know. You have to evaluate your own system, and a lot of this lecture goes to you evaluating the safety culture of your respective agencies, and then first examining yourself and then your agencies and seeing where you're at and your agency is at, your peers are at in a culture of safety. And then risk of harm to members of the community. The greatest risk is always going to be to both the community and ourselves, particularly going to emergencies and from emergencies, but for any call for that matter, right? People see the flashy lights and they hear, and we tend to step on, the cues and the other warning sounds that we have sitting in an intersection. If you're stuck in traffic, or you're stuck in traffic and blowing on your air horn and yelling at people and doing those sort of things doesn't really move traffic. And I know a few will be saying, well, yeah, it sure does. But at what risk? At what risk to yourself and to the community? So, do you share this definition of a culture of safety? Okay. Does your service share this definition of a culture of safety? And again, you can read faster than I can speak, and so just take a minute, soak in the words, and we'll move on. So, part of this slide, I think, is um, I think there's something to be said for emergency responders, EMTs, AMTs, paramedics that have been in the field working for years and years with good clinical practice. It's a young person, it's a younger person's game, and so that person that's been in 10, 15, 20 years, they do have some experiences that they can speak to. I found, at least in my own personal peer groups, that the older we get, the more safety conscious we become, right? And I think that just kind of goes along with maturing and seeing things and learning from mistakes. And the question is, as it relates to particularly this slide, are we learning from those mistakes, and are we being consistent with creating that culture of safety and presenting it to the younger ones within our respective professions in an effort to almost preach the um, now that I know what I know, I want to prevent you from making the same mistake, sort of thing. So here are the 6 core elements for the EMS culture of safety: a just culture, coordinated support and resources, EMS safety data system, EMS education initiatives, EMS safety standards, and then requirements for reporting and investigating safety concerns. So, a just culture, it's going to promote accountability not only within your peers but yourself. Right, you have to hold yourself accountable. The shortcut that's not safe is not really a shortcut, but it's a recipe for further headache, right, or potential injury or death, perhaps. Um, excuse me. A just culture assesses risk, not only your own risk, but your peers and the organization as a whole's risk. It doesn't blame or punish, and frequently within our profession, we're real good to jump and blame, even if someone has a very justifiable safety concern, or they make a mistake because of something that we've done for years, which we just kind of been lucky. We got away with stuff. It happens to catch them. They get hurt. Someone else gets hurt, and then we blame them for their actions. However, we kind of set it up years past, right, with bad practices. So we don't want to blame or punish, and we want to look to and identify risks that lead to errors, right? And one of the big things that supervisors will struggle with, and we sort of become enculturated to it, is we need to be able to clearly define between risk and liability, or safety and liability, right? And there is a difference at times. A safe behavior as compared to, so safety is something we should all look at. Liability is more of a legal issue, right? So when you choose to do something or not do something from a safety perspective, I encourage you to look at it from truly a safety perspective and not just the liability perspective, right? The potential for something to happen, for instance. So an example might be, for you fire dogs out there, rescue squad guys, EMS folks, if you were to do some vehicle extrication training and putting live simulated patients, from a liability standpoint, lawyers might be like, oh, we're putting people at risk for getting injured. From a safety standpoint, as professionals, we will take a calculated risk and put these folks in a safe condition so that we can, at the most, accurately simulate the conditions that we will experience in the field without causing any harm to either the rescuer or the rescuee. Okay. A coordinated support and resources. So it's the creation of a guidance body, and this is a body that would have like no authority or no oversight. It would basically be a group of stakeholders, and by stakeholders, that's you, all the folks that you respond with, right? So law enforcement, fire, rescue, but it also includes citizens, government officials. Maybe it involves utilities, so on and so forth. And the coordination of that information would be that there's a unified message for all stakeholders, and that unified message is going to be best safety practices relative to the events that we are encountering. Okay, and so the authority piece is important because it's an agreement that, particularly if you're working with competing agencies, for instance, a private ambulance company and a municipal fire department, for instance, we can still create this culture of safety, of best practices, without having one or another kind of standing over saying, no, you did this wrong or you did this wrong. It's an agreed upon set of values that we share, we hold each other accountable for without punishing and blaming, to ensure that the entire scene and our entire culture is one that keeps us as safe as possible, because right at the end of the day, we want to be going home. So EMS safety data systems, this picture is from an accident that occurred in New Jersey in 2014. There were minor injuries, but all were released, and then blame was not assigned, and so we won't even go into that. I don't know any of the further data on that. So EMS safety data, or a safety data system, should be accessible at a national level. And this data, as it's compiled, should be available to a variety of different agencies, because we may be great firefighter EMTs or paramedics, or great paramedics and EMTs, or great emergency medical responders or whatever, but maybe we're not super good at creating data and creating a statistical analysis of information revolving around injuries or deaths or things like that, or incidents. But by allowing outside folks to get this information and then kind of stream it through a common point, right? So this national level sort of database, it'll help to identify areas and drive policies to increase the well-being of, number one, EMS personnel, number two, patients, and number three, the public. Okay, and what we're trying to do in regards to personnel, patients, and public, right? The three P's, is to decrease injuries, decrease illnesses, and decrease negative incidents, right? Because for an incident, like we as emergency responders go to incidents all the time, right? That's just kind of the common terminology we use, but we don't want those incidents to become worse because of something we've done. So EMS educational initiatives, safety starts with EMS leaders and educators and involves everyone. And as an EMS educator or an EMS leader, and this includes, fire, rescue, or whatever, it starts with practicing what you preach. No one likes a hypocrite except maybe the hypocrite, right? So, there's a big difference between the guy that says it, people will follow those that lead with their actions. And so if you're leading in a safe manner, folks will take notice of that, and they'll follow your safety-driven initiatives, right? Initial EMS programs must encourage a culture of safety throughout the program, right? So that includes stuff like wearing safety glasses, wearing gloves, continuing education and new employee orientation must infuse a culture of safety throughout the curricula. One of the things that EMS programs at times don't do a very good job of is as we start talking about things like motor vehicle collisions. Frequently, EMS, when they get on the scene, don't have the protection necessary to safely enter a vehicle that's been involved in a significant collision, while your fire folks do. And so that is an opportunity. While you may be a higher level of certification, say you're a paramedic and your fire crew showing up, or your rescue crew showing up, are EMRs or EMTs or AEMTs, it's better to let those folks that actually have the safety equipment on and available get in the vehicle or borrow it if they're willing to allow you to do that. But it's not the time to be into a power struggle. Hey man, can I borrow your bunker coat and your helmet? No. Okay, then dude, I need you to get in the vehicle, and this is what we need to do. Okay? We need to be continuously doing smarter things based on safety and not on ego. EMS safety standards. So safety standards for patients and responders, safety must be developed using data and evidence. Okay? And then a coordinating body, which would be that kind of multi-stakeholder organization, not only just within your locality, but maybe regionally or nationally, can coordinate these efforts to combine work and data completed by various stakeholders and projects, and hopefully create a more safe work environment. We also need to have requirements for reporting and investigation, right? So mandates for safety, for reporting safety, are necessary, and so a common language and data set can be created to improve responder and patient safety. And it must include, right, determining what data already mandated and available, determines what data are necessary and useful, learning from those hands-on experiences, assigning and obtaining authorization for an investigation body, identifying existing best practices, and I would add to that creating an environment free of punishment and retribution for reporting incidents which may be deemed unsafe. Again, sometimes our business goals and our safety goals are in opposition of one another, and safety should always win. So, for discussion in your respective classes, consider these questions in regards to the policies, practices, daily organizations in your organization, right? What changes are needed to encourage the development of a culture of safety? You don't have to say what agency you work for, okay? And you can speak in blanket terms, but you're encouraged to, right? A lot of folks, we can get good dialogue going on between various agencies within the classes. How are mistakes handled if one is made during a patient care encounter? And how should it be handled if applying the concept of just culture? So, in your discussions, which the discussion link will be found in the same section, Culture of Safety, under the operations in your respective courses. Click the link to go to the discussion. Please answer these following questions. I look forward to seeing your responses in the discussion section of the course. And here are a list of references. Thank you very much.